Tanaka-san raised several questions, and Professor Colin, so please reply to Tanaka-san's question and also give us some comments over Sophia's comments, please.
Well, first of all, Professor Tanaka, thank you very much indeed for your comments. And let me clarify the very important point that you're making when I say that there is no trade-off between purpose of solving problems and creating value for shareholders. And let me explain why there is no trade-off, because this is something that is frequently discussed, that there inevitably are trade-offs. But the way in which I've defined it is that the purpose of a company is to produce solutions profitably. So a company should not be engaging in philanthropy, namely solving other people's problems without earning a commercial return on having solved those problems. It's just not the appropriate role for a company as against a philanthropic organization, for example. Now you're then saying, well, if that's the case, what's the difference of it from the Friedman doctrine of increasing profits? And is there any change in what is expected of a board? And the answer here is yes, a profound change on two schools. The first is that the problem with the existing approach is it's a confusion of cause and effect. That is to say, I am not saying that the purpose of a company is to produce profits. I'm saying that the purpose of a company is to produce solutions, and in the process, it should produce profits. So profits are derivative of solving problems. Profit itself is not the objective of the company. It derives from solving those problems. Now, the particular significance of that is that then in the second part of the statement, that companies should not be profiting from producing problems, because that is exactly where the current difficulties have arisen. That companies have not seen themselves as essentially focusing on solving problems, and in particular, ensuring that they don't profit from producing problems. And the issues that I started off my talk by discussing in relation to environmental problems, inequality, social exclusion, and mistrust derive from exactly that, a failure to recognize that the prime focus of a corporate purpose is on solving problems, that profits are derivative of that, and in particular, that in the process of solving those problems, companies need to ensure they do not profit from producing problems. So that is a fundamental difference. Now, to come to the very interesting discussion that Sophie described, I absolutely agree with everything that she said. And in particular, I just want to re-emphasize a point that I referred to briefly, and that is that one of the main benefits in terms of having a purpose along the lines of what I'm describing is the way in which it does create trust and attracts talent. And the next generation of employees that I see coming through my business school in Oxford and that people around the world see graduating from business schools have a completely different view of what they are seeking from employment from the previous generation, who were focused predominantly on salaries and income from their employment. This current generation is much more focused on what they believe to be meaningful, fulfilling work, where they are perceiving the companies they're working for in delivering some real benefits beyond the financial returns.
Okay, thank you. Tanaka-san, do you have any reply? Is it okay?
Yes, one thing. Your comment reminds me of some great founders of businesses in Japan. Many great founders did think that they started a business for the interest of society at large, but they also thought that their business would be profitable. And like Toyota, who found Toyota company, Toyota automobile companies, or Ibuka, who found Sony, from Sony. So in some sense, your thought was what great founders really thought in history. I'm sorry. I might still misunderstand your argument. Thank you.
No, I absolutely agree that many founders, when they establish companies, have exactly this purpose in mind, and that is what they see as the vision for their companies. The problem that typically arises, in particular as companies go through the process that Sophie was describing in Anglo-American markets of selling their companies on to others, listing them on stock markets, and instead of having owners who have a real interest in promoting that corporate purpose, they have investors and owners who are simply interested in the financial performance of the company. It is at that stage that the focus on a purpose as being driven by solving problems and deriving financial returns from that is lost. And that is the real problem that occurs if one shifts too much in a direction away from having controlling shareholders to outside dispersed shareholders, in particular institutional shareholders who are predominantly focused on short-term financial returns.
Okay, thank you. So it's a time to wrap up, but just one very interesting question comes from us. And one question is, so Sophie is here, and there is a news that the Danone CEO was obliged to resign a few days ago or yesterday. And the reason of this incident is the CEO is putting stress on social purpose issues, and it is rejected by shareholders. So that's a very symbolic incident. So do you have any comments on that? Or, so it's a very sensitive issue. So do you have any comments on that? Sophie?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, please go ahead, Professor.
No, you go first, and then I'll say it.
So I think, first of all, I'm not privy to anything with regard to the company. So I only have the information that we read in the media, and particularly the French media. And you see two different views. The first is that there seems to have been a very severe governance failure within the organization. And I think a number of investors, including the activist investors that targeted the company, and I need to point out there were, I think, 2, maybe 3 activist investors with small stakes, were really pointing to those governance failures. The second is that, and I think it goes really to Professor Meyer's point, is that purpose does not replace returns. And so again, if you're finding solutions doesn't necessarily have to be a societal solution. It's a solution to a problem that society has. For example, providing food, which is one of the solutions. And I think in this case in particular, the issue that came up was the fact that the company's returns were very, very underperforming, let's put it that way, and especially against peers that are renowned. So the real thing here was, I think, the governance failure, which, again, an activist does not go after a company that's doing well. An activist goes after a company that's not doing well. And if you add to that a governance structure and maybe even a board that doesn't reflect what investors believe will provide the effective oversight, then you really have a recipe. The fallout is that some people believe that it's because they were socially conscious that they were targeted. I would argue that it's because they didn't have the results and because they had a governance structure that didn't measure up to expectations is the reason they were targeted.
And
Colin, just 1 minute, please.
Yeah, okay, very, very quickly. I absolutely agree with what Sophie has said. And the problem, I think, is Emmanuel Faber, as the CEO, then chairman, was absolutely a fervent supporter of the notion of moving a company beyond just shareholder returns. However, there was an element of reflecting what I was describing as viewing this as a stakeholder versus shareholder issue, and not really as a business model that was there to drive both better financial performance as well as benefits for society more generally. And so that balance was lost, and reasonably, shareholders felt that the company was not fulfilling a purpose along the lines that I was describing it, namely to produce profitable solutions to problems.
Thank you. So the time is end, so we'd better to stop and wrap up here. So thank you so much for very useful presentation and interesting comments. So this is the first episode of this seminar series, and we are planning to have another 4 webinars, and it was planned in from April to July, and we updated the information for these seminars. And since the program is very serious as well as very comprehensive, and we have a lot of things to discuss using the rest of 4 webinar series. Again, thank you so much for your active contribution to webinar series. So let's close here this seminar today. Thank you so much.